My background is my father was in the forces, so we got transferred all over the country. So I'm kind of national in that respect. I grew up, going to different schools. And then eventually when I went after a career, I joined the Merchant Navy, where I was there for about a decade and a half. I sort of gave up that career because I had spent about 5 years as a captain. And then I said, I can be a captain for another 40 years, or I can go and do something else with my life. And eventually it turned out that I did many, many other things with my life. I just wasn't one who would follow a certain career path. I don't know if it's just the rebel in me, or was it sort of the over strictness that my father had instilled while growing up. I just went on to do many different things in my life and didn't stick to a disciplined career. Good or bad, I don't know, but it's turned out into who I am and who I've become. So after I sort of left the Merchant Navy, I thought that if I want to do something with my life, then I need to understand business. Because carrying or climbing the corporate ladder means you need to understand management and business. And although I had sort of had a leadership role in the Merchant Navy, I didn't understand the financial and the sort of the business side of it. It was pure operations most of the time, even sort of operating ships. And I'd worked on the largest of ships. I was a very young captain. And then I said, okay, in order to learn it, my assumption at the time was go and do an MBA, which is the fastest way to learn. But I have learned over the years that it helps. But the fastest way to learn business and management is to start your own company. There's no better way to do it than getting your hands dirty and doing it from scratch. So even before doing that, I had started businesses in partnerships with people. And most of my sort of entrepreneurial ventures have been with partners. So it was very few of them were on my own. And of course, as with anything that you try new, there were several successes and several failures, or maybe more failures than successes. And I was fortunate that in some cases we were also able to exit, and we were bought over by other companies. And that is how I ended up with a large listed corporate entity based in Finland. And then a few years later, because you have lock-in periods when you exit a company so that your stocks are paid out completely to you. So I had to put in those 2-3 years of sort of mandatory labor that they required me to do. And eventually there we sort of helped. It was a large engineering company. So we then helped set up sort of the digital business division with an ambition to build a 1 billion business in 5 years, virtually from scratch. Anyway, long story short, I got out of that during the COVID. And my last role with the startup, I just exited in the first week of June. And during my notice period, I was thinking what to do. And I had this hobby project called Capture High, which was going on in the background, which is basically because I had worked with many different startups and helped with mergers and acquisitions in my past corporate roles. So I said, why not do something that helps startups? Because if somebody is a serial entrepreneur, he's learned the game. He knows what to do, who to contact. He's got the connections in the industry. But if somebody's a first-time entrepreneur, then they may be a very good expert or a very good software developer, for example, but he knows very little about how to hire a sales team, how to do marketing or launch a product, or very little information about the legal aspects of business, such as non-disclosure agreements or contracts and things like that. So he is quite naive. He may be the world's best software developer or app developer, and he has a great idea. But because of his lack of knowledge in the other areas, when you run a business, most of them tend to fail. So I said, let me help such people and build a community around it. So startups need these services. Most startups today need a website. So they have to go and find out who can build it right for them. And they may hire the wrong people and burn their fingers in the bargain and burn a lot of money because they may be putting all their savings into it. So let me build a community, and then they figure out who is the best person to hire if that community is that I can reach out within the community. So the idea was, it's a community or an ecosystem where startups meet freelancers or consultants or advisors, and they can work out how they get paid or remunerated and what's the work involved. And it was set up to be purely global. Whoever could be part, it was free. And it was just, organically growing in the background. There's about 3,500 people on it, including entrepreneurs. And I was surprised when people from private equity, venture capital, hedge funds, family offices of people like the sheikhs and angel investors started joining because they saw that they wanted to be part of this ecosystem. And naturally, people started saying that, okay, I am a specialist. I want to build this company. So a software developer who wants to build something for the mines or something for logistics or something for pharma, he needs subject matter experts from those fields. Somebody who's spent 20, 30 years, knows the inside outs, because only whatever solution he has built has to be sort of customized to that industry. So they started looking for advisors, consultants, not just for their management team, and as they were setting up boards, also for the board, for their board members. So obviously, my circle of board members were very few, although I had been on quite a few boards. I think for the number of companies out there, the number of advisors required quite a few, and always finding them. I very rarely have come across a company that's looking for a board member and they sort of engage a recruiter for it. It all goes by word of mouth. That's been my experience. And as for my experience, what I have seen was it was a colleague of mine who had set up a company a few years ago, and he kept trailing me saying that, Melvin, join me as a board member because your expertise, your knowledge can help us. And I kind of brushed him away saying I have a full-fledged role, and there are days when I am tempted to even sleep in the office because there's so much work. And there's really no time for you. And it was a listed company. So I said that, you need to get through all the legal approvals and things like that. And I doubt whether I can join you. But after he chased me for 4, 5, 6 months, in the 6th month, I eventually relented. And I said, okay, let me seek the approval from the big boss. So I went to the deputy CEO. Who was an Italian guy, and he said, this sounds great, as long as there's no conflict of interest, go ahead, because what you learned there, ours is a 186-year-old company, and we need to know what's happening new out there in the startup world, because they use the latest technology and the latest know-how, and young minds work there. So whatever you learn there, you'll bring here, which is great for us, and whatever experience and exposure we have and the client base we have, you can take there. And if there's no conflict of interest, it works both ways. We get knowledge about what's happening latest in the world, and they get knowledge what you take from here. So I joined that board, and surprise, within 6 months, I was on 4 other boards. I wasn't even looking for a second or a third board position. It just goes by word of mouth. One board member's exiting from somewhere, and your name gets proposed, and they have a short chat with you, and they say, okay, we're taking you on. So in my case, one person was retiring in one of the companies. In another company, I think somebody got a terminal illness. And in the third one that was there, I think the person's tenure was over, and he didn't want to continue on that board. So that's how I got mine. And thereafter, it just spreads by word of mouth. So that's been my experience. I don't know if people out there have other experiences, but this has generally been my sort of journey. And generally, when I speak to people, that seems to be about how it goes. The first board position is that stepping stone that you need to get through, and the others, even if you're not looking for it, just comes through. Obviously, you've got to be friendly, and and what I've generally seen is because you meet the board, then you have khana pina with them, and you sit around and chat, and you become friends and family. So obviously, when a seat comes up on a board, then you're proposed. And obviously, the company that takes you on does their own due diligence. It's not like just because you're proposed, you're taken on. They kind of do a cursory search and a background search, and they talk to you and the other people that you're linked to. And that's how it seems that people take you on. And in my case, I don't have a board position in India. Most of my board positions are in the Western world, in the US and in North America, in Scandinavia. and in Europe. So when I came down to India about a year and a half ago, I was saying, since I'm here, why not look for a board position here? And then I got to know that you've got to be qualified for it. And so when I went through the qualification, then there were these institutions who were providing classes or material for study. And I almost got myself enrolled in one of them. And then I sort of agreed that I'd pay up on Monday morning. And then on Saturday or Sunday night, when I was just sitting around, browsing on the internet, which seems to be most young people's hobby. I'm not young anymore, but I do believe I am so young somewhere in my heart. But anyway, I was browsing around and I said, okay, let me check on the MCA or the portal. What's the criteria, and if I have all the certificates in place that I may need to submit for it. So when I looked around and I fed in my details, it said that since your previous board experience, you're exempted from it. And if I pay a fee, then they will issue me a certificate without the examination and requirement. So I just qualified without having to go through the course. And although I have done extensive study after that, because I realized that I need to understand the Indian context and the Indian legal system and the regulations if I have to be effective on a board. So I have actually gone through the IRCA course material, not all of it. I'm still going through the process as and when I get time. So I got the exemption. I got a letter of or a certificate of exemption, and I also got a certificate saying that I'm sort of a certified board member. And then, of course, I had to go and disappoint the institution, which had sort of thought that they'll get me as a student. So that's what happened. But that's my experience. And thereafter, I've spoken to hundreds of board members. And then while I was on this notice period to resign from my last role as CEO, I was reflecting on what I need to do. And I felt that there's all these people who have qualified, but what to me appear to be a common theme is most of the people who qualified as independent directors or planning to qualify almost halfway through the journey haven't got actually a board position. And that seems to be sort of across the board, across all institutions who are providing these courses. So I said, why not do something about that? Because I already have Capture High, which is a startup ecosystem and advisory and community, and they look for talents. I mean, they look for not only independent board advisors, they look generally for board advisors too. And also for not just advisors to the board, but advisors to the management team. They look for interim positions, interim CEO, interim COO, CIO, somebody they need for three months, 6 months, a year for whatever reason, because an acquisition is taking place, they need somebody to come and lead them, or somebody's fallen ill, or whatever the reason may be. So these people started approaching me for these roles. And then I said, okay, here's an opportunity to actually provide something that people have qualified themselves for. And to be honest, I don't know how successful this will be, but I said, let me build this into part of Capture High. I mean, I have a lot of ideas for Capture High and where to take it, including sort of building a credit rating agency for startups so that they can get better loans and things like that. But startups don't have, CRISIL rating like we have or mature companies have. So it's very difficult for a startup to get a loan from a bank or any other financial institution. So most venture capitalists or angel investors go based on a gut feeling or think that this idea is going to work. And that's probably why 90% of startups don't make any money or go bust in the first year. So this was the idea. I mean, there's other few ideas. So I tied up with one of my recruitment friends who's been hiring C-level roles for I don't know, 25 years. And we said that let's focus on senior management and board positions, because it's senior management people who eventually become board members. And it will also help people who have an ambition, who are maybe looking for board roles, but because they don't come across as either senior level or they may want to start with an interim role or start as an advisor to a management team before they get the board advisory role. So this is at least the mission that we set out for Capture High. And it's quite early days. But then what I realized is Capture High, because it's built globally, I don't have to focus on India as the only market for independent directors. I can have independent directors in Africa or South America, which is completely unexplored, and we don't have the exposure to it. But I've realized that there's a lot of people who are coming on Capture High, including people from places like Mongolia, where people don't expect a lot of business to be there. But I have company CEOs who've come up and said that we'd like talent. And I think primarily so because India is now looked at one of the fastest growing economies. So they believe that at some point they'll need to enter India and establish presence here. So what better way than to have an advisor on the board who can help them with that, who's on the ground based in India. And the other thing is, during the pandemic, what I realized is earlier we used to have board meetings either once a month or once a quarter, and it used to be physical, face-to-face meetings. But with the pandemic, a lot of board meetings have moved online. And so now you can be a board member based in India, and you can, they may have a couple of companies that still insist on one face-to-face meeting, as an offsite somewhere in the world. But most of the meetings, they're happy to do it completely virtual. So you can be on a board in Africa or North America or, I don't know, Scandinavia, Australia, wherever. And they are happy to do a cyber meeting or an online meeting as a board meeting. So it kind of opens up things for us considerably. You don't have to travel for a whole day if you're going to New Zealand, for example, for a board meeting. But you can just spend 2-3 hours and you can attend another board meeting in the latter half of the day or something like that. So, so at the moment, it's very early days for us at Capture High. And my whole ambition is to get people on their first board seat. And thereafter, we can, I basically feel that you'll have the wings to fly to go to how many boards you want to. And I know India has a board restriction for, I think it's 7, but globally there's no such restriction. And of course, India has one of the, most stringently regulated board requirements. Most countries don't have that. And I also realized that you don't have to be an independent board member. With your experience, you could also be just a board member without being independent. So the independence is there where it's required, but they may want somebody from a board, somebody to be on the board purely based on your experience. For example, you're in oil and gas and they are providing a product or a solution to oil and gas. You don't have to be independent. You can be a board member who purely brings that oil and gas experience. So you know the inside and out of oil and gas. So I said, I don't have to focus on independent directors and their placement alone. And in most of the world, there is no regulation around independent directors. It's very few countries, including India, where independent, directors are even penalized if they don't do their due diligence and follow ethical and moral standards. So that's how it is. But the other thing I've realized is I have been offered a few board positions in India, and to call a spade a spade. The reason I haven't taken 2 of them is one was they offered me 1 lakh rupees as sitting fee and 9 lakh rupees under the table for every single board meeting. And the reason I didn't take it was purely because from the word go, they are paying you under the table. So it sort of the integrity of the company is in question from the way the word go. And the second company offered me 1 lakh plus 12 lakhs under the table. So it calls to question that what do they really want you to do there? They clearly want you to sign on the dotted line on, and once you accept something like that, then it becomes very difficult to turn somebody down because they've already got you by your throat, if I can put it that way. I'd like to use a better term, but anyway, they already have you in their grasp because you've accepted terms. And and later on, when I spoke to my friends who have now grown into, stalwarts within the corporate listed world in India, they said you did the right thing, because the moment you accept a position like that, then you get branded as such. Then a really ethical and moral company will never even approach you. Whereas if you set a standard as somebody who will only work, with an ethical standard and with morality, then you get labeled as such. And then companies who really want good ethical board members will then approach you as a result. So I think I made the right choice, not selecting them, but as a result, I'm not on any Indian board. But then I've just started looking for board positions in India. But then I said, if I'm going to focus on sort of building Capture High, then I've got to focus on that. If some board position comes along, and if I feel that it fits into what I'm already doing, then I'll take it. Others, let me see who I can help. So that's where I stand. So one thing I got to know from my discussions within companies and speaking to company secretaries. So just for information, it is company secretaries who normally look out for board positions, because I think they are the ones who need to once you're accepted as a board member, then they are the ones who need to fulfill the reporting requirements with MCA and things like that. So from what I have understood, they have said that, again, this is a very small community of people in India, and it circulates among them, among those group. If you're already a board member, it helps. Even if you don't have too many connections, because the first thing they ask you, even if they reach out to you out of the blue, is, do you have previous board experience? So my mission is to get that first board experience to anybody who wants to be on a board. And then we will see where it goes, because I just believe that the first board position will take you everywhere else. So yeah, so that's my sort of vision or thinking behind Capture High, and I've decided to pursue it, among other things, for Capture High. And I briefly had a chat with a few of you already. I think I may have spoken to 40-50 of you within the WhatsApp group that we have. And fortunately, everybody has been very encouraging. So I'm even more driven to see where it goes. And, I don't mind failing. I've failed many times in my life, many different startup ventures that I've done, including pharmacy and event management and shipping and logistics and luxury items and whatnot, including a French skincare product. So I don't mind failing. I just would hate myself if I didn't try. So let's hope that it works out and we can place some people. And obviously, the only thing that I suggest is I don't need people to see you, so you need to have the visibility. So what I've been telling people is just keep your LinkedIn profiles updated, and and if you follow Capture High, then I can tell people that these are people who are on Capture High, so you get the visibility as well. And usually what they do is people do a desktop search for any name that's given, and what comes up is their LinkedIn profile. So if you keep that updated, then they have, before they reach out to you and have a one-on-one conversation, they already have some sort of a background about you. And at the moment, I'm not making any money on it. So there's this is just pro bono work, which will hopefully pay out in the long run in some form. So I'm looking for good karma here, if that works. So I think I have spoken what I've had in mind. I don't have a presentation as such, and Capture High is purely on LinkedIn. There is no website or app or anything around it. Only because it was a hobby thing that I thought will help startups. And the reason I thought about startups, I've worked with a few thousand startups because I was working with accelerators and incubators in Singapore and in Europe. So I had the good fortune to work with and discuss with many startups over the last 6 to 10 years. So that's where the idea of helping startups came. But now it's turned the other way around, where I've started helping freelancers and consultants and advisors with startups. So I'm sort of helping both ends of that ecosystem, which is wonderful. I wasn't expecting it, but it's turned out that I guess if you do something with a good heart, then it all turns positive. I'm waiting for the negative part of it to come out. Eventually there will be, because the journeys always have, rocks and mountains, as well as, pastures and good roads. So it'll be a great journey, whichever way